The marble floors of Townsend Communications echoed with the sound of fast footsteps and sharper voices. "I'm not saying we can't expand, Matt. I'm saying we shouldn't, not yet," Chandler Townsend said, rubbing his temples in frustration. The conference room lights gleamed off his navy suit, which looked freshly pressed despite the hour-long argument he was currently neck-deep in. Matthew Simpson, CFO and longtime friend turned frustrated colleague, crossed his arms. "We've had the best 2 fiscal quarters in the company's history. Our tech integration is up, ad revenues at an all-time high. The Asian market is ripe, ready for the taking, and the board agrees." Chandler sighed, slumping slightly in his chair. "The board agrees with whatever shiny numbers you flash in front of them." Matthew raised a brow. "That shiny number includes a projected 38% revenue increase if we partner with Zen Media in Singapore. That's not a flash, it's a fact." "Matt?" Chandler looked at him with a rare softness. "I want to see my mom. I want to have dinner without 3 phones ringing in the background. I want to maybe, for once, remember what life feels like outside a meeting room." Matthew ran a hand through his close-cropped hair, then gave a resigned nod. "So what, you're checking out?" "No," Chandler said, standing up. "I'm taking a breather. A week. That's all. I'll give you my answer then." Matthew pointed a finger at him. "1 week, and I'm holding you to it." 3 hours and a luxury sedan later, Chandler stepped out into the peaceful stillness of his hometown, a place where time seemed to move slower and nobody cared about quarterly reports. His mother, Ruth Townsend, wrapped him in a floral-scented hug the moment he stepped onto the porch. "Still wearing that stressed-out expression, huh?" she teased. "I inherited it from you," Chandler chuckled, kissing her cheek. Later that afternoon, while Ruth was baking her infamous peach cobbler, Chandler stepped outside to stretch his legs. That's when he saw her. Bailey Mercer, hair pinned in a loose braid, a paint-smudged t-shirt hugging her figure, and a pair of red Converse on her feet. She was holding a mason jar of lemonade and trying to wrestle a ladder up against the side of her art studio. "Need help?" Chandler called out. Bailey turned, squinting. Well, if it isn't Mr. Wall Street himself. What brings you back to the land of mosquitoes and no Wi-Fi?" He laughed, jogging over. "Taking a break from boardrooms and big data. Helping damsels with ladders now." She arched a brow. "Careful, your Armani suit might not survive manual labor." "Actually," he said, rolling up his sleeves, "I brought jeans this time." They spent the rest of the afternoon catching up. Bailey teased him about his high-profile lifestyle. "You've become quite the tabloid darling. New girl every few weeks. Is it like a calendar subscription?" Chandler snorted. "They're all setups, networking dinners with an emotional bait and switch. I haven't had a real date in, I don't even remember. No time for romance." "Of course not," she said, feigning solemnity. "Too busy swimming in money and board meetings." "And what about you?" he asked, leaning back on the porch swing beside her. "Still single?" "Yep," she said with a shrug. "Apparently I'm too boring. Going out to meet people feels like job interviews with cocktails." "You've never been boring," Chandler said seriously, looking at her. "You've always been the most interesting person I knew." Bailey blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "Okay, Romeo," she teased, bumping his shoulder. "You come back here with your fancy shoes and flattery now." He smiled, just wondering how I didn't see it back then. She laughed, shaking her head. "You were too busy trying to install Wi-Fi in the treehouse." They sat there in comfortable silence, the warm breeze carrying the scent of cobbler through the air. Chandler glanced over at her again, and for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about markets or margins, just how her eyes crinkled when she laughed. Maybe taking a week off wasn't such a bad idea after all. By midweek, Chandler had settled into the easy rhythm of small-town life. He found himself waking up to the smell of Ruth's cinnamon biscuits, spending the afternoons at Bailey's studio, helping her hang paintings, and sitting on the porch every evening, sharing stories with the 2 women who made him feel more like himself than anyone in his corporate world ever had. On Thursday evening, the three of them sat around a small patio table, sipping sweet tea under strings of soft yellow lights. Fireflies blinked in the yard like lazy stars, and Ruth's laughter echoed into the open night as Bailey recounted a story about Chandler nearly breaking his arm falling out of their childhood treehouse. "Who knew you'd go from clumsy tree climber to CEO?" Bailey teased, nudging him. Chandler grinned. "Trust me, half the time, I still feel like that clumsy kid." Then his smile faded a little as he leaned back in his chair. "We're talking about expanding into the Asian market," he confessed. "Huge partnership opportunity, profitable. Everyone's excited, but I'm not sure. Feels like I'm just running from one big deal to another." Bailey looked at him with quiet curiosity. "Why wouldn't you go for it?" Chandler stared out at the dark horizon. "Because lately, I walk into a room full of people and feel completely alone. I don't even know who I'm doing it for anymore." Ruth set down her glass with a knowing sigh. "Sounds like you need a wife." Chandler let out a loud laugh. "Mom, I barely have time to sleep. Where exactly do you suggest I pick one up? At the drive-thru?" Bailey smirked. "Maybe one day, someone will catch your attention. Then you'll have to decide, keep chasing deals or chase her." He glanced at her, half joking. "She'd have to be someone special, like you." Bailey's smile lingered a beat longer than usual, her eyes twinkling as she looked away. "Then she's got her work cut out for her." Later that night, Chandler sat on the porch swing between Bailey and Ruth. The breeze was soft, the sky a wash of stars. He exhaled deeply, letting the quiet wrap around him. "I wish I could stay a little longer," he murmured. "You could," Ruth said gently. Bailey added, "Townsend Communications won't fall apart without you for one more day." Chandler looked at them both and smiled. "Don't tempt me." Chandler stepped back into Townsend Communications on Monday morning, greeted by the familiar hum of ambition, the clicking of heels on marble, the ping of elevators, and the sharp scent of imported espresso. But instead of feeling recharged, his chest felt tighter than it had all week. He'd barely made it into his office when Matthew poked his head in. "Glad you're back," Matthew said, walking in like he owned the place. "I took the liberty of setting up a lunch meeting today. Ginger Harper, big name in social media branding. She's interested in collaborating with us, and I think you'll find her interesting." Chandler narrowed his eyes. "Interesting how?" Matthew smiled, too casually. "Smart, media-trained, stylish, follows your work. Let's just say she checks all the right boxes." "Matt," Chandler said, with a note of warning, "this isn't another networking blind date, is it?" Matthew held his hands up. "It's business, casual lunch, no pressure." Still skeptical, Chandler arrived at the upscale bistro that afternoon, dressed in his usual tailored suit, prepared for polite conversation. When Ginger Harper walked in, flawless in designer couture and accompanied by a cloud of perfume and curated charm, Chandler's gut twisted. "Chandler," she greeted, offering a cheek kiss like they'd known each other for years. "So thrilled to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you from Matthew." "Have you?" Chandler replied, forcing a polite smile. "That's interesting." The conversation over lunch was one-sided. Ginger talked about her brand, her followers, her travel schedule, and how great their names would look together in the press. Chandler tuned out somewhere between her third mention of a possible joint photo shoot and the enthusiastic plan to go public as a power couple by the end of the quarter. He returned to the office in silence, the elevator ride up feeling longer than usual. When he reached Matthew's office, he didn't bother knocking. "You set me up," Chandler said flatly. Matthew looked up from his desk, unfazed. "She's perfect for the brand. You two together would generate buzz, expand visibility." "I'm not interested in turning my personal life into a press campaign," Chandler interrupted. "I said I needed time. I said I wanted space. Instead, you shoved Ginger into my schedule like she was part of a business merger." Matthew sighed. "Chandler, it's not about love. It's about image. The board sees you as a bachelor CEO with no roots. You want stability in this expansion? A grounded image helps." "Well, I'm not going to force a relationship just because the board needs a love story," Chandler snapped. "I won't pretend to be someone I'm not." As he walked out, Chandler realized just how suffocating this world had become, and how refreshing that week on the porch with Bailey and his mother had truly been. The next few weeks were a circus. No matter where Chandler went, corporate mixers, charity galas, even a product launch in Soho, Ginger Harper just happened to be there. She'd slip her arm through his, pose for pictures, and laugh a little too loud when the cameras were near. "She's radiant, isn't she?" Matthew had said once, scrolling through a glowing media article that declared, "Power couple, Townsend and Harper stir up headlines." Chandler, reading the same article in the elevator, muttered, "Radiant like a supernova headed straight for my career." Meanwhile, Ginger's social media was ablaze, every post strategically hinting at intimacy. A cropped photo of Chandler's hand on a wine glass, a blurred image of his silhouette at a gala with the caption, "He gets me." The board? Thrilled. Investors? Buzzing. But Ruth Townsend wasn't fooled. She'd only gotten clipped calls from her son lately. Always busy, always tired. No warmth in his voice. So she packed an overnight bag, knocked on Bailey's door and said, "We're going to visit Chandler, today." Bailey blinked. Should I pack snacks or bail money? Both. When they arrived at Townsend Communications, the receptionist barely blinked before leading them into Chandler's expansive office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, brushed steel furniture, and just enough warmth to not feel like a spaceship. His assistant brought tea and offered a polite smile before slipping away. The door burst open 20 minutes later, Chandler's voice booming. "I said no more blind alignments, Matthew. If Ginger crashes one more event," he froze mid-sentence. Ruth stood from his desk chair, arms folded and eyebrow raised. "Hello, darling." Bailey gave a small wave, perched awkwardly on the edge of the visitor's sofa. "Hi, boss man." Chandler's eyes widened, then softened with a rush of relief. "Mom? Bailey?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling his mother into a hug and pressing a kiss to her cheek. "You didn't tell me you were coming." Then he turned to Bailey and surprised her with a gentle kiss on the cheek. "You too? This is the best ambush I've had all year." Matthew, standing awkwardly behind him, cleared his throat and extended a hand toward Ruth. "Mrs. Townsend, a pleasure." She shook it briefly, eyes narrowed with maternal suspicion. Matthew then turned to Bailey, something calculating flickering in his eyes as he smiled. "Bailey, it's been a while. Chandler mentioned you were an old friend." Bailey nodded warily. "Well," Matthew said brightly, "since you're here, we're having a company gathering tomorrow night, rooftop restaurant, beautiful view of the city. You both should come." Chandler shot him a look, but Matthew just smiled. "It'll be nice, great food, and the view might even change your perspective." Bailey met Chandler's eyes, and for the first time since walking into his glittering too-big office, she saw something she recognized, the same boy who once gave her the last scoop of peach cobbler and swore it meant forever. The evening sky over Manhattan shimmered with golden hues as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting a soft glow over the rooftop restaurant. The venue buzzed with executives, investors, influencers, and media personalities. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter filled the air. And at the center of it all, Chandler Townsend stood waiting near the private entrance, his tailored suit pristine, but his mind completely occupied by one person. When the elevator doors opened and Bailey stepped out in a sleek emerald green gown, Chandler's smile bloomed wide and genuine, his whole face lighting up. Ruth followed behind, beaming proudly. "Told you that dress would make jaws drop," she whispered to Bailey. Chandler stepped forward immediately, offering his arm with an almost boyish glee. "You look stunning." Bailey blushed, her fingers looping through his arm. "You don't look too bad yourself, Townsend." He leaned in, voice low. "Let's give them something to talk about." As they entered the main dining space, conversations quieted. Heads turned. Flashbulbs sparked as Chandler led Bailey through the crowd like she was royalty. When they reached their reserved table near the center of the terrace, Chandler raised his glass and cleared his throat. "Everyone," he said confidently, "before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone very special to me. This is Bailey Mercer, my girlfriend." Bailey blinked, lips parting slightly in surprise. That hadn't been the plan. But seeing the way Chandler stood beside her, solid and sure, she quickly composed herself, giving a soft nod and smile to the room. Across the terrace, Matthew stood with Ginger Harper, his expression unreadable. Ginger's manicured smile faltered for half a second before she composed herself and whispered something to her assistant. Moments later, she swept into the restaurant, flanked by her camera crew like a one-woman PR hurricane. "Chandler," she called with practiced brightness. "Didn't expect to see you already entertaining tonight." He turned to her calmly. "Ginger, this is Bailey, my girlfriend." Ginger's lashes fluttered, as if the words had stung. "Oh," she gasped with faux surprise. "You seem lovely, but are you sure she's ready for this life, Chandler? It takes more than a pretty face to thrive in our world. Cameras, attention, pressure. I mean, clearly she wasn't prepared for tonight." Bailey, up to that point poised and reserved, squared her shoulders. "Do not get me twisted," she said, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Yes, I was caught off guard by Chandler's announcement. We agreed to keep our relationship private. But it seems you think you have some kind of claim to my man." Ginger's smile tightened. "So," Bailey continued, her eyes locked on Ginger, "it's only right that Chandler set the record straight in front of everyone. And thank you for your concern. But I don't need to thrive in your lifestyle. I thrive in my own, one that doesn't involve camera crews and pretending for likes." The silence that followed was thick with admiration. And just a little bit of shock. Chandler looked at Bailey, pride glowing in his eyes. He gently took her hand and kissed it. "Well," Ruth said from the side, sipping her champagne, "this evening just got interesting." And Ginger? She may have arrived camera-ready, but she'd just been completely upstaged by a woman who didn't even try. After the dinner, the buzz of the evening slowly faded as the last guest departed, and the rooftop quieted. The city lights shimmered below, like a sea of stars. But Chandler only had eyes for Bailey, as they stood by the railing, a soft breeze tugging at the hem of her dress. "I'm sorry," Chandler said, his voice low, almost nervous, "for springing the girlfriend thing on you like that. It was impulsive." Bailey gave a small laugh, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's okay. I've survived worse surprises. Would have just been nice if it were really true." Chandler looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. "It could be. I'd like it to be." Bailey's breath caught. "Why now?" Chandler stepped closer. "You know there's always been this thing between us. Even when we were kids, even in college. I think I never got seriously involved with anyone, because you were always in the back of my mind." He took her hand gently. "And now with everything going on, people trying to script my love life, I realize if I have to choose someone, I don't want it to be a performance. I want it to be real, with someone I actually care about. I don't know how to fake love." Bailey's eyes shimmered as she looked up at him. "So, you love me?" Chandler didn't hesitate. "Yes, I love you, Bailey." A quiet pause, then Bailey leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It was soft and warm and full of every unspoken feeling they'd carried for years. When they cooled apart, Bailey smiled. "Call your PR team. It's time the world knows Chandler Townsend and Bailey Mercer are in love." And for once, Chandler didn't feel like a headline. He felt like a man finally coming home. The next morning, the Townsend Communications office hummed with a steady rhythm of keyboards and morning lattes. But in a glass-walled corner office, Matthew Simpson sat silently, watching a video clip on his phone. Chandler and Bailey kissing on the rooftop under the city lights. His jaw tightened. He had hoped Bailey was just a momentary distraction, a spark Chandler would snuff out once the pressure of the expansion grew. But now she was official. Publicly, emotionally, dangerously official. And if Chandler stayed with her, there was no telling what direction the company's image might take. Stable? Maybe, but not strategic. No influencer partnerships, no vinyl campaigns, no Ginger Harper. Matthew slid his phone into his pocket and pulled out his contact list. Ginger Harper arrived at the private club within the hour, all flawless makeup and crocodile heels. She swept into the room like a performance, her polished smile already in place. "So," she said, settling into the plush booth across from Matthew, "I assume this isn't about brunch." Matthew leaned forward. "You saw the news. Bailey Mercer, mousy, barely on socials, no brand recognition. She's becoming a liability, Matthew said. Chandler's serious about her. Ginger sipped her green juice with disinterest. She's in the way. I've got a fragrance launch next quarter, a fashion partnership pending, and a major ad campaign that depends on locking in Chandler Townsend as part of my narrative. Then we're aligned, Matthew said with a tight smile. You handle her. I'll make sure the board stays focused. ... Ginger tilted her head. Oh, I'll handle her. I always do. What Matthew didn't know, however, was that Ginger's picture-perfect exterior masked a tempest behind closed doors. The assistants who styled her, fetched her smoothies, and triple-checked her captions knew the real Ginger. Demanding, manipulative, and verbally abusive. One assistant in particular, Damon Brooks, had had enough. For 6 months, he had quietly collected voice recordings, screenshots, and emails, screaming matches. Threats, cruelty behind the camera lights. His folder tucked away in a private drive had one purpose: protection, and perhaps one day, justice. That day was coming soon, because Damon had just seen Ginger's meeting on the club's security feed. He watched as she leaned in and mouthed one dangerous word: destroy. He clicked open his folder and hit upload. The smear campaign began with whispers. Anonymous gossip accounts posting vague, passive-aggressive jabs at small-town nobodies, trying to punch above their weight. Within days, Ginger Harper's close influencer friend, Alicia Bloom, dropped a podcast episode suspiciously timed, titled When Women Clout Chase CEOs. The next morning, a slick blog article followed, suggesting Bailey Mercer had a checkered dating history and used Chandler Townsend to leapfrog into the spotlight. Ginger was thrilled with the online frenzy. This'll spook her, she told Matthew smugly during another backroom meeting. Small-town girls can't survive big-league flames. She'll crack. But Ginger underestimated one thing. Bailey Mercer didn't crack, not for anyone. A week later, Chandler and Bailey were leaving a business event, hand in hand. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Reporters swarmed like bees to honey. Bailey, what do you have to say about the recent articles accusing you of being a social climber? Are you dating Chandler for the media attention? Alicia Bloom called you a nobody in designer knockoffs. Any comment? Bailey stopped mid-step, her hand still tucked into Chandler's. She turned toward the crowd, smiling, not with nerves, but with unbothered confidence. Sounds like someone's a little desperate to get rid of me, she said, her voice clear and strong. Spreading lies is what happens when certain people can't get their way. But let's be honest, it's pretty transparent. The reporters stilled, their pens freezing mid-scribble. She continued. Chandler and I have a long history, one that didn't start under paparazzi lights or sponsorship deals. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, just the opposite. Now that the world knows about us, we're not just staying strong, we're building a future. She glanced at Chandler, then back at the crowd, with a cool smile. So let Miss Harper and her friends throw their little attacks. Let them call me names. But when the dust settles, I'll be the one wearing the ring. I'll be the one called Mrs. Townsend. The crowd erupted in a flurry of shocked murmurs and camera flashes. Chandler chuckled, proud and completely in awe. He leaned over and gently kissed her forehead, in front of every lens. That's my girl, he said softly, arm tightening around her waist. And they better get used to it. The cameras kept clicking, but this time the story was hers. Ginger Harper sat in her penthouse, seething, as she watched the viral clip of Bailey on the morning news. Well, let Miss Harper and her friends throw their little attacks. Let them call me names. But when the dust settles, I'll be the one wearing the ring. I'll be the one called Mrs. Townsend. The headline beneath it read, Bailey Mercer breaks for silence and shuts down rumors with class. Ginger screamed, snatching the nearest object, a crystal vase, and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall, missing her assistant Damon's head by inches. Are you insane? Damon shouted, ducking and backing away. You could have killed me. Ginger whirled around, eyes blazing. Please, don't be so dramatic. You just threw a glass missile at my face, Damon exclaimed. She laughed bitterly, folding her arms. You? You're nothing. A worthless nobody I picked up off an app. No one would even notice if you disappeared. Damon stood frozen, watching her storm into her dressing room. She had no idea he'd been recording the entire exchange, just like he had the past few months. But this time, he wasn't going to stay silent. 2 days later, Damon sat in a private conference room across from Chandler and Bailey. He looked nervous, but resolute. He pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. "I've had enough," he said. "I've worked for Ginger for a year. The woman you see on camera, that's not who she is. She's dangerous. She manipulates, screams, threatens. She nearly hit me with a vase 2 days ago." Chandler leaned forward. "And you have proof?" "I recorded everything," Damon nodded, "including this week's meltdown. But that's not even the worst of it." He opened his laptop and pulled up an email trail. "Matthew, your CFO. He's been working with Ginger behind your back. I overheard a call. He promised his contacts in the Asian market that once Ginger married you, he'd ensure she received a sizable share of the company." Bailey's mouth fell open. "He was planning a hostile takeover?" "Exactly," Damon said. "He pitched Ginger to Matthew as the perfect brand wife. Polished, famous, controllable. She'd win you over, marry you, get a stake in the company, and once the expansion with Zen Media was finalized, they'd leverage that to take over a significant share of the company. Ginger gets her mega ad campaign and a chunk of Townsend Communications. Matthew becomes CEO." Chandler sat back, his face pale with disbelief. "I knew Matthew was pushing too hard, but I didn't think it was this deep. I sent the audio files, contracts, and email threads to your private inbox," Damon said. "Everything you need to prove what they've done. I don't want anything. I just want the truth out, and Ginger out of my life." Chandler looked over at Bailey, then back at Damon. "Thank you, seriously." Damon stood, relieved. "Be careful. They won't go down quietly." Chandler's jaw clenched. "They'll go down, though." Bailey reached for his hand. "We do this together." Chandler nodded. "It's time we clean house and make sure everyone knows who really runs this company." The boardroom at Townsend Communications buzzed with tension as the evening meeting convened. The city skyline glowed through the towering windows, but the mood inside was anything but serene. Board members settled into their seats, murmuring about the urgency of the gathering. At the far end of the room, Chandler Townsend stood confidently, his posture sharp, his expression unreadable. Bailey sat quietly near the back, unnoticed by many, but not by Matthew Simpson, who immediately scowled. "Why is she here?" Matthew asked, gesturing toward Bailey with a dismissive flick of his hand. Chandler didn't flinch. "This board insisted that I needed a wife. That image was more important than integrity. That's why she's here." A few chuckles echoed awkwardly. Matthew scoffed. "Come on, Chandler, be serious. She can't give this company the exposure it needs. Not like Ginger could." "Oh, like Ginger?" Chandler repeated, his voice laced with irony. He nodded toward the large screen at the front of the room. "Funny you should mention her." The lights dimmed slightly as a video reel began to play. At first, the board saw Ginger behind the scenes, glamorous, composed. But the footage quickly shifted. There was Ginger screaming at an assistant, slamming a tablet onto the floor, throwing a vase that missed someone's head by inches. Her voice echoed across the room. "You're nothing. I made you. You're worthless." A collective gasp rippled through the room. One board member muttered, "My God." Chandler turned back to the table. "You all pushed me toward her, said she was perfect for the company's image. I kept wondering why Matthew was so insistent, until I got this." The screen changed again, this time to a series of emails between Matthew and Ginger. Promises of ownership. A multi-million-dollar ad campaign. A marriage contract in exchange for shares. "This has to be fake," Matthew snapped, rising to his feet, panic flooding his features. "This is a setup. Anyone could have." Chandler raised a hand. "Don't bother. Our cybersecurity team verified the metadata. IP addresses, timestamps, every thread. You and Ginger planned to use me. Use this company, and I'm done being manipulated. The room fell silent again as Chandler's words sank in. I now move to remove Matthew Simpson from his role as CFO, effective immediately. A board member quickly followed. Seconded. All in favor? Hands rose one by one. Matthew's face turned crimson. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake, Chandler said coldly. Security will see you out. 2 guards entered the room as Matthew sputtered, then reluctantly allowed himself to be escorted away, his legacy crumbling behind him. When the door shut, Chandler exhaled and turned to the remaining board members. As for the overseas expansion, he continued, we'll revisit it, but after Bailey and I are married. Because if this company is going to grow, it's going to grow with values, not schemes. He glanced at Bailey, who stood now smiling. The boardroom, still stunned, remained silent as Chandler walked toward her, taking her hand proudly. Back in Chandler's office, the tension from the boardroom had finally lifted. The skyline twinkled through the tall windows, casting a warm glow across the room as Bailey perched on the edge of his desk, still amused. I sent a copy of that Ginger meltdown reel to a few trusted news outlets, Bailey said, smirking as she crossed her arms. She wanted fame. Well, she's about to get world fame. Chandler raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Just as Bailey leaned in to kiss him, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. They checked them and laughed in unison. A text from Ruth lit up their screens. So what are your color themes? I'm at the flower shop. I'm going to make some arrangements. Let me know soon before I buy the whole store. Bailey grinned and quickly typed back. We're on our way. Wait for us. Chandler chuckled as he grabbed his jacket. I love how she's already deep in the wedding planning, and we haven't even picked a date yet. Or said yes in a formal way, Bailey added with a wink. But I'm not complaining. I'm kind of excited to see what she comes up with. As they headed toward the elevator, Chandler glanced over at her thoughtfully. You know, I've been thinking about Damon. Bailey looked at him. What about him? Chandler hit the elevator button. The guy risked a lot, his job, his safety, to bring us the truth. He's smart, loyal, and he clearly understands the media landscape. Bailey smiled. You want to hire him? I do, Chandler nodded. I'm thinking of bringing him on as part of our social media marketing team. Maybe even lead brand integrity monitoring. That's a great idea, Bailey said as they stepped into the elevator. He knows how to see through the glitz and get to the truth. We could use more people like that. Then it's settled, Chandler said, already pulling out his phone. I'll have HR draft the offer and send it over by end of day. As the elevator doors closed, Bailey leaned against him with a content sigh. Life's about to get really interesting, she said. Chandler looked down at her and smiled. It already is. The fallout from Ginger Harper's reel was swift and merciless. Within hours of the footage hitting the news cycle, hashtags like #GingerExposed and #HarperUnhinged trended across every platform. Sponsors pulled out. Fashion houses issued statements distancing themselves. Brand collaborations vanished overnight. Even her most loyal followers turned against her, flooding her page with angry messages, memes, and clips of her explosive behavior. Her once polished Instagram became a war zone of disappointed comments and viral parodies. In one final dramatically captioned post, Ginger announced she was stepping away from the spotlight and boarding a private jet to find peace overseas. The comment section was less than sympathetic. Meanwhile, in the calm aftermath, Chandler took a long overdue week off from work. He and Bailey escaped to a quiet coastal town where the ocean breeze, local cafes, and lack of Wi-Fi gave them something they hadn't had in a while: each other. They spent days walking barefoot on the beach, holding hands through the farmer's market, and falling asleep to the sound of waves instead of ringing phones. There were no corporate meetings, no media flashbulbs, just stolen kisses, shared laughter, and conversations about everything they'd never had time to say. When they returned, the wedding planning kicked off. They agreed on a small, intimate ceremony, just close friends and family, but decided to throw a large, elegant reception to celebrate with everyone who supported them through the chaos. Within the month, they were married under a canopy of flowers in Ruth's garden, where Bailey wore a simple ivory gown, and Chandler looked at her like he'd waited his whole life for that moment. Later that evening, the reception buzzed with joy at an upscale city venue. Lights twinkled, champagne flowed, and laughter echoed across the dance floor. Damon was there, holding the camera, not as an assistant, but as Townsend Communications' new head of social media and brand integrity. He'd been officially hired 2 weeks earlier, and covering the wedding reception had been his first big project. "Smile," he called out as Chandler dipped Bailey back for a kiss in the center of the room. Bailey laughed, breathless. "That one better go viral." "Oh, it will," Damon grinned. But for all the right reasons this time, and as Chandler twirled Bailey around the dance floor, the past finally behind them, their future had never looked brighter. The end. Hope you enjoyed this story by Green Tea Tales. Support our channel, comments, like and subscribe.